At the beginning of a new day, the sun peeks through the windows and wakes up those who are sleeping sweetly in their beds. The girl does not immediately understand that morning has come and, out of a desire to sleep longer, asks to turn off the light. The beauty's hand finds the young man who lies next to her and, without hesitation, touches him. The heroine lies completely on the chest of the guy who is nearby, after which she admires him and his physique. But then the girl realizes that something is wrong because she ended up with a man in her bed. She raises her head and notices a young man with an attractive appearance who is sleeping next to her and has no idea about anything. The hero turns out to be a blonde man who settled down next to the girl on the same bed and had no intention of waking up yet. But no matter how handsome he is, the heroine still panics because she has no idea what happened. Then, to figure it out, she begins to remember what happened the previous day, and it turns out that last night, in honor of the coming of AG Day, she attended a masquerade ball that took place in the Imperial Palace. There she met a man with an ideal appearance, calling out to him to get acquainted. Although the girl's plan was to find a worthy son-in-law for her father, she did not expect that everything would go so far. And now the heroine doesn't know at all what to do next after this. However, soon the girl's thoughts again switched to the one who was lying next to her. The heroine liked the young man so much that she was ready to have an affair with him if he didn't mind. But soon, the girl's reasoning was interrupted by the awakening of a mysterious stranger because she did not know what to do next. Finally, the man woke up and immediately looked at the heroine, who was very worried about what was happening. But the hero did not look frightened. On the contrary, he smiled quite calmly, and it was clear that the presence of the girl nearby did not surprise him at all. The beauty did not expect this. She was very surprised and embarrassed, which was obvious because she blushed slightly. And things only became even more embarrassing when the guy approached Judith. He addressed her like that, kissed her, and asked how she slept. It seemed that the girl's eyes had never opened so wide before. She was so shocked. Although Judith was very worried, she still tried to answer the young man's question, trying not to show her awkwardness. And then the man asked her if the heroine was angry, but she did not understand what he meant by that. The hero admits that yesterday was his first time, and therefore he could not control himself, and for this, he asks her for forgiveness. Listening to this, Judith began to burn with shame, not knowing how she should respond to this. She is surprised that although the man has such a beautiful appearance, the first time happened only yesterday, although with such external data, he definitely enjoys the attention of the female sex. And by the way, the man behaved yesterday. It was difficult to say whether this was the first time or not, because he was quite natural and skillful in bed. The hero is so worried that he invites the girl to call a doctor if she doesn't feel well. Hearing Judith say that she is fine, the man offers her a snack if the girl is hungry. To this proposal, the heroine replies that she usually doesn't have breakfast, but can have lunch at home. But the girl's words went unheeded because the young man still tells her that she will go home as soon as she eats. Although the hero turned out to be too persistent, this still does not affect Judith because she urgently needs to return home so that her father and brothers do not worry. And then, jumping out of bed, the girl realizes that she is standing in only a blanket. Then Judith asked the young man to turn away because she needed to get dressed and get ready. And again, they ignored her, explaining that she had nothing to be embarrassed about because they had already seen each other and there was no need to be embarrassed. The man also reminded her that they had already named each other names. And then, a memory of Judith asking the stranger to introduce himself to her flashes before her eyes. The hero says that his name is Theo, and after that, he persistently kisses the girl. What happened yesterday appears in Judith's memory, making her blush. Theo gently clarifies whether the heroine remembered everything. Judith is still crazy about the young man's appearance, and she constantly begins to inadvertently admire him. What happened yesterday needs an explanation, and the girl decides to confess something, trying to collect her thoughts and not be distracted. But Judith doesn't let her speak. The knock on the door, and the fact that the hero is pressing her to himself, hiding her from strangers. Unexpectedly, the heroine hears that someone addressed Theo as His Majesty. This appeal led the girl into a dead end because she never expected such a turn of events. It turns out that Theo needs to be addressed by Your Imperial Majesty, or perhaps the heroine simply heard something wrong. But the young man makes it clear that she heard everything correctly, agreeing with her. In response to this, Judith only smiles sweetly, pretending that she is not particularly interested in this information. However, she was only pretending, but in fact, she realized that she was thinking that she was in serious trouble. And so, sitting in Theo's arms, the heroine recalled all the rumors that were circulating about His Majesty, especially the fact that he was considered a tyrant. But the most surprising thing is that the heroine finds herself in a place from a romantic novel that she read before her death. In this novel, the heroine becomes a knight, and together with the emperor goes through all the difficulties and hardships. But she is not just a knight, but also the one who heals the wounds of a cold-blooded ruler. And in their happy ending, the characters fall in love and walk down the aisle. The main character, Serena, impresses the girl and considers her an amazing woman no matter how you look at her. The novel also has a minor villain, Judith, whom the reader does not like at all because she married through family connections, but achieved nothing herself. However, the heroine still sympathizes with Judith because the villain was unloved in the family, and because of envy, she ultimately dies. But in any case, the girl understands that she would not want to be in the body of this character because for her, this is the worst of all evils. But when she woke up after reading the novel, she very much regretted her words. After all, as soon as the maid calls her name, the heroine realizes that she has been reborn into the one she least wanted to be. Does God really have some kind of grudge against her? Otherwise, in a past life, the girl was also a child deprived of attention, and she entered the university only on the third attempt. It turns out that in a past life, the heroine died in a car accident a week before the admission ceremony, which she finally achieved after so many years. The girl believes that it is unfair, after all this suffering, to be reborn not into Serena, but into that character who has a hard life. The reborn girl cries and prays to all the gods to bring her back. Indeed, in the novel, Judith dies at the hands of the protagonist, who is a tyrant. The main character's name is Theodore Gra Lou Valdemar, and he is the current ruler of the Valdemar Empire, which has the largest territory on the continent. He is the only heir to the imperial throne, but the previous emperor had a mistress who gave birth to a son. Theo's own mother committed suicide after false accusations were made against her. The main character ascended the throne at the age of 19 as soon as his father died. And soon after this, the second prince born from his mistress died in a fire for unknown reasons. The girl ended up in a novel in which Theo was the main character, and also in the future Judith's husband, who killed her because the heroine interfered with his romance with the main character and was a real enemy for the emperor. Then the heroine simply decided that if she never met His Majesty, then no one would kill her. Judith was the only daughter of the ducal family, and if she tried hard, she could live happily without getting involved with Theo. The girl is confident that she will cope with her second life because she is a fan of romance novels and knows everything about them. The main thing is to act nice so that others will love and cherish you. In a past life, the family did not treat the girl as well as the current household does, and Judith lived for her own pleasure without thinking about any matters or problems, thinking that this life for her was the best one could dream of. The only problem for the girl is the emperor whom she still had to deal with. Then the heroine decided simply not to meet with Theo, not appearing at any balls, but she didn't last long because she decided to start an affair with someone. Then Judith went to the coming of AG Day Masquerade Ball, which is held for all members of the nobility who have recently become adults, and the girl was sure that the emperor leaves the ball every year after making a congratulatory speech. This is an ideal event to find someone to romance and find a son-in-law for her father. But Judith quickly became disillusioned with this ball because there was not a single handsome man there that the girl would like. Therefore, the heroine decides to leave this event with nothing because she understands that she will not find anyone for herself here. But then she notices someone who immediately attracts her attention and stops her from leaving. Finally, she is lucky to find an incredibly handsome young man who immediately steals Judith's heart. All he had to do was smile, and the girl decided that he must be her future husband. But then the heroine notices that the stranger is about to leave, and she must quickly stop him. Otherwise, she will lose him. Judith had no intention of letting him go, so she got his attention by calling out to him. And at this very moment, the girl notices that her mask begins to fall, but does not have time to do anything about it. While the heroine was dealing with the mask, the main character disappeared from her sight, but she was not going to retreat and went to look for him. In the end, the girl was able to catch up with him and began to follow right behind him, waiting for some kind of reaction. Judith achieved that they paid attention to her because the stranger asked whether he should call her brave or naive, and then the young man said that she shouldn't follow strangers so casually. But the girl found something to answer, reminding the stranger that he was the first to start making eyes at her. At this, the hero grinned, and then began to take off his mask, which was clear from the movement of his hand. The stranger's temptation worked because Judith succumbed to him, starting to follow the young man. The hero took off his mask and approached the girl, waiting for an answer to his words. However, the heroine continued to just stand without saying or doing anything. She simply looked at the man, amazed by his beauty. And then Judith abruptly grabbed the stranger, pulled him to her, and kissed him, which the hero did not expect at all. Later, their kiss escalated into them moving together into the man's bedroom. But the young man suddenly changed his mind, saying that this was unacceptable and he should not do this. It was not clear what exactly was unacceptable because the girl was already an adult. According to the man, Judith will regret it later but does not explain the reasons why. The girl was not afraid of the stranger's warning, looking at him confidently and smiling. And then she promised that she definitely wouldn't regret it. And in the end, they continued kissing each other again. The next morning, the heroine did not deny that their night was incomparable. But after she found out the identity of the stranger, she regretted that she agreed to it because the unknown man turned out to be the emperor whom Judith had tried so hard to avoid. And now the girl blames herself because she didn't think that there could be a dirty trick behind her beautiful face. As a result, the heroine began to apologize to Theo, asking for mercy and promising that she would never appear in the emperor's sight again. But Theo was hurt by the girl's words that she was going to leave him. The emperor was offended by the fact that the heroine spent the night with him, and now she is simply going to run away. Seeing the emperor's change of heart, the girl began to worry that she would now meet her death. But instead of hitting, His Majesty gave Judith a tender kiss. Since the heroine was able to drag the emperor into bed, now she must not run away but bear responsibility for what she did. But the girl still thinks that she will have to answer for what she did with her death. But judging by the fact that the emperor expects something from her, he is not going to kill her yet. As a result, Judith, having overcome her fear, tells Theo that she is ready to answer for her actions and take responsibility. Afterwards, she asked His Majesty what exactly she needed to do to atone for her guilt. As a result, the girl was not only not killed, but also fed deliciously, which she was very happy about, but was surprised because the emperor does not seem to be such a bad person as she imagined him to be. Although she knows from the novel that Theo is a tyrant, when the young man smiles, he looks very good-natured. And then the emperor said something that made Judith choke on her food, because Theo asked when was the best time for them to get married. The girl does not understand what kind of wedding they are talking about because they have only known each other for one day, and she did not know that everything would go so far. The emperor decided that the cook was to blame for the girl's coughing because he gave her bread, and said that this was tantamount to an attempted murder on his part. Theo demanded that the cook be thrown into prison, and so he showed his true essence, which was hidden behind his beautiful face. Judy tries to make an attempt to save the chef, telling the emperor that it was her own fault because she simply chewed her food too quickly. Theo replied that it was not her fault. The girl had a piece of bread stuck in her throat, but the blame was on the one who baked the bread. The emperor's behavior at that moment reminded the heroine of her father and brothers, who also always defended the girl and blamed others. Judith remembered an incident from her childhood when, through her fault, a servant's hand was almost cut off, but she was able to calm everyone down when she acted nicely and asked for a hug. Only the girl's kindness and sweet behavior could moderate the ardor of her father and brothers, and she decided to pull this trick on Theo. Making a sad face, the heroine told the emperor that she would be very upset if something happened to this chef, because she really liked the bread that he baked. After that, Theo asked the servant to tell him that, in the future, the chef would pay more attention to menu planning and also told him to give him a bonus. The girl didn't think it would really work, but with her actions, she saved the life of a man who could have been punished for nothing. Having done a good job, the emperor waited for praise and for Judith to recognize that he had done well. After nearly ruining a man's life, Theo now smiles sweetly and expects praise like a puppy. Instantly forgetting about the incident, His Highness reminded Judith that they should discuss their wedding. It turned out that when Theo said that the heroine should take responsibility, he was talking about the wedding and not her murder, as she thought. Judith is very nervous because in the novel, her heroine also had a marriage with the emperor, which led to terrible consequences, but it would also be dangerous to refuse. Because of her refusal, her father and brothers, as well as herself, may suffer in the future. At that moment, a servant knocked on Theo's door with the words that an urgent matter had arisen, and the emperor displeasedly asked what had happened. But Judith was delighted at the servant's arrival because he saved her, giving her a little more time to think about what to do. The emperor apologized to the heroine and said that he needed to leave for a while on important business. His Majesty promised that he would return soon, and told the heroine to rest for now and to speak immediately if she felt unwell. Judith wished Theo to quickly sort out his affairs and wave goodbye to him. The emperor was angry because he was separated from his girl and looked boredly at the man who had come to him. Even Emperor's assistant Alpin noticed that His Majesty was clearly not in a good mood today. Theo immediately got down to business and asked why Sir Pilgrim had come to him early in the morning. The head of the noble council, Duke Joseph Pilgrim, came to the Emperor to ask his help to allocate several soldiers to search the imperial palace due to the fact that his daughter had disappeared. Miss Pilgrim's whereabouts after yesterday's visit to the banquet at the imperial palace remain unknown. The disappearance of the young lady is a serious incident, so the Emperor gave his permission to search the imperial palace, for which Joseph is very grateful. His Majesty reminds that searching the palace is considered a serious act of assistance to the government, so Sir should remember this act of generosity from the Emperor. To which Pilgrim replies that he will never forget and will definitely repay Theo's kindness. There are no more important things to do, so the Emperor's mood has risen again, because soon he will be able to see the girl again. But all the Emperor's plans collapse the moment his servant bursts in and reports that the lady who spent the night with him has disappeared without a trace. Once given the chance, Judith decides to escape while the Emperor is away, because for her, this is the best outcome of events. The girl told the servant that she was not feeling well, and then ran away while they sent for a doctor for her, and even left His Majesty a note of apology. The heroine decided to ask her maid Marie to pretend to be her, and Judith herself would run away to another country. And according to her plan, when Theo comes to visit the heroine, he will see Marie and simply give up, deciding that he will no longer be able to find the girl. And then His Majesty will fall in love with Serena, as in the original story, and everything will end well. And in the end, the girl will be able to return home to her family and live a happy, carefree life. But no matter how ideal her plan is, it fails immediately because the heroine has lost her identity card, which is necessary to leave the imperial palace. And the idea that Judith needed was already with the Emperor because it was found by the servant in the corridor of the banquet hall. Thinking about the heroine, Theo admires the fact that she is a charm, so he is definitely not going to let her go so easily. The servants are surprised that the Emperor did not react aggressively to this incident because they are well aware of the young man's temper. One of the servants even asks whether it is necessary to punish the one who ran away from him, to which he replies that it is not worth it because she just left for a while. Meanwhile, Judith continued to wander around the entrance to the imperial palace, deciding to approach the guards and explain the whole situation to them in the hope that they would let her through. But there was a risk that the Emperor would find out that she was Lady Pilgrim. Then both she and her family would have problems. The girl began to think if there was any chance to distract the guards so as not to reveal her identity and quietly run away. Suddenly, a familiar voice reached the heroine's ears, and she realized that it was the voice of her brother Kieran Pelgrim, who was the commander of the Aiden Knightly detachment. Judith immediately ran to meet her brother, seeing her salvation in him. Then the guard attacked the girl, demanding to confirm her identity, but Kieran stopped him, explaining that the heroine is his sister. Then the guards apologized and released Judith, who will finally be able to get out of the palace with the help of her family. The girl is immensely glad that her older brother came to her aid, who unexpectedly turned to the heroine wanting to say something. Kieran started asking Judith if she was okay, where she went yesterday, and if anything bad happened to her. In response to this, the heroine said that she simply drank too much yesterday, and therefore fell asleep and then apologized for it. But the girl's brother did not let up, asking if nothing really happened to her, to which she said that she just fell asleep, and when she woke up, it was already morning, missing the fact that in addition, the Emperor was lying next to her. For Kieran, the most important thing was that his sister was safe and sound, and in the end, he told her to wait in the carriage while he went to get his father, which surprised the heroine because she did not know that her father was also here. And so she learned that her father had gone to the Emperor and asked him for permission to search the imperial palace. His Majesty must not be allowed to reveal Judith's identity, because then she will have a lot of work to do, so this must not be allowed under any circumstances. And she decided to persuade her brother to just let her go home and not wait for anyone due to the fact that she felt bad because of what she drank yesterday. Then Kieran ordered the guard to wait for Sir Pelgrim, and he himself decided to immediately go home with his sister. As a result, the girl was still able to escape from the palace and get to the mansion of the ducal Pelgrim family, where she lives with her father and brothers. The Lord of the Magic Tower, Ludwig Pelgrim, who is Judith's second older brother, is already waiting for the arrivals at home. Ludwig immediately bombarded the girl with questions about her condition, so much so that the girl did not even have time to answer them. And then Judith notices that her brother's clothes are stained with something that looks like blood. But the Lord of the Magic Tower reassures his sister that he never kills good people, so she shouldn't worry. At that moment, the father returned to the mansion, who immediately called Judith and told her that he had been worried all last night. Finally, the whole family was assembled, and Judith was able to apologize to everyone at once for making them worry. The father also asked the girl if she was hurt, to which the eldest son replied that Judith was not feeling well. As soon as Sir Pilgrim heard this, he immediately demanded to call a doctor, to which the girl thought that he should know when to stop. The doctor was nevertheless called. He examined Judith and was now going to make a verdict on her well-being. The doctor said that Judith had an upset stomach due to drinking too much alcohol, which caused everyone in her family to start worrying. Everyone immediately began to give instructions to help the girl with her illness as quickly as possible. But the heroine hastened to calm everyone down, saying that everything is fine and everyone can return to their business, which they definitely have because each of them occupies a very important position. Afterwards, the girl sweetly added that she felt much better just because she saw her family. These words touched the soul of every family member, and they calmed down, no longer worrying so much. As night fell, the girl began to put her plan into action because she had already dressed up as a maid and was about to run away. But the maid that Judith left in her place tries to talk the girl out of it because Maria is not sure how to cope with becoming a replacement for the heroine. Judith still leaves, leaving behind only a letter that the maid will have to give to the girl's father. There was a small exit in the fence, which Judith eventually found and was able to climb out, happy that the escape was a success. The heroine only had to get to the port, and she would be free. But then she heard someone calling out to her. It turned out that it was the emperor who, holding out his hand, told Judith that he had come for her. This is how the girl returned to the palace from which she had so long and stubbornly tried to escape. The emperor's palace perfectly matches its status because it is surrounded by luxury. Theo tells the girl a legend that the first ruler of the empire, Valdemar, was half man, half dragon, and therefore the dragon is now a symbol of the imperial family because they worship his power. According to the emperor, even now, from time to time, members of the imperial family are born who inherit the power of dragons, as if hinting at themselves. According to the novel, Theo inherited a body as strong as dragon scales, heroic strength, and a sword with an ego called Raken, which was used by the first emperor. Theo was so powerful that he was recognized as emperor, even though he was marked as a killer. In addition, Judith still remembers that His Majesty will soon meet the main character, Serena, and thus find the love of his life. And while the girl was cherishing thoughts of freedom, the emperor began to take off his shirt. Still seeing this, the heroine did not understand what Theo was doing, and he actually just wanted to change clothes. He also offered his clothes to the girl, promising that tomorrow the emperor would call the best couturiers for her to sew the best outfits. Having thanked His Highness, the heroine began to change into the clothes she had received, which greatly embarrassed the emperor. The girl had a bruise on her neck, and Theo assumed that Judith had only pushed him away because he couldn't control himself the night before. The emperor felt guilty, so the heroine began to reassure him that everything was fine yesterday so that he would not worry. And since the girl liked it, His Majesty wastes no time and immediately asks if they can then repeat it. At first, Judith was surprised that Theo himself decided to take the initiative, but then he says that it's time for them to go to bed because it's already late. The emperor wishes the girl good night, kisses her, and they go to bed. Something went wrong in Judith's plan because she planned to have nothing to do with His Majesty, and now she sleeps in the same bed with him. Another morning, the girl wakes up in Theo's arms when the sun begins to shine through the window. And the heroine again admires the figure of the emperor, and especially his broad chest on which she lies so comfortably. Although Judith had a feeling of power this time, His Majesty did not sleep and asked if she really liked his breast so much, and then said that she could continue to touch her. The girl immediately apologized for her tactlessness, blaming herself for getting herself into trouble again. But instead of answering, Theo simply takes the heroine in his arms, which made her feel embarrassed. The hero brings the girl to the table, where breakfast is already waiting for her. Judith doesn't understand why the emperor is in such a good mood today, and because of this, she begins to have a bad feeling. And then he started talking about their wedding again, and was already thinking about what day it would be better for them to hold the ceremony. The emperor offers to hold it the day after tomorrow, which greatly shocks the girl because it's too fast, and she didn't even give her consent. The girl urgently needs to come up with a reason to prevent this wedding, because she definitely won't be saved then. Then the heroine decided to tell the emperor that she had deceived him, and, in fact, she was not Judith, but a maid of the ducal residence Pelgrim. She explained to Theo that she could not marry him because she was just a commoner who went to the masquerade ball instead of the real Judith. However, the emperor said that no one would dare to oppose, so he has the right to marry whoever he wants. After this, Judith's arguments that they should not marry ended. Since the wedding cannot be cancelled, then they need to drag it out until Serena appears in their lives, and the girl herself becomes free. Therefore, she said that she wants to have a wedding during the cherry blossoms, because the Emperor will meet the main character in September. This proposal upset Theo, because the cherry trees will bloom only in March next year. Although the Emperor was sad, he still agreed to hold the ceremony on the day when the cherry blossom petals would fly. Meanwhile, at the Pelgrim residence, Judith's father and brothers learned that their beloved daughter and sister had disappeared, to which the maid said that the father and brothers would have to understand everything when they read the letter that the heroine left. Then all family members got acquainted with the letter left by her, in which the girl said that at the masquerade ball, she had made a huge mistake in front of the Emperor, and therefore was now forced to hide for a while so that his anger would not transfer to the Pelgrim family. Judith, in the letter, asked to show the Emperor Maria if he came looking for Lady Pelgrim, in the hope that after some time His Majesty would surrender and she could return back. The heroine also apologized for causing them all to worry. But the father was not going to leave it all like that, so he told Karen and Ludwig to take the knights and search the capital because she could not go far in such a time. And at this time, the father himself will go to the imperial palace to deal with everything, and while the Pelgrim family was looking for the girl, she herself was already tired of having to choose her own clothes. In addition, what happened during the fitting was that she stepped on the hem of the dress, and because of this, she had to reassure the Emperor so that he would not do anything to the couturier. His behavior still reminds Judith of how her household behaves. And then the heroine comes across a portrait depicting a boy with dazzling blonde hair and deep blue eyes. Judith immediately recognized the young emperor in this handsome painted man and said that even if the picture was turned upside down, the child would still continue to be a copy of Theo. Then His Majesty asked if anything else came to the girl's mind, but Judith only said that he had been very handsome since childhood, and then she saw how the emperor's mood changed as if she had said something wrong. The heroine asked Theo a question clarifying why he wanted to have a wedding with the girl, to which His Majesty replied that the reason lay in the night they spent together. Theo says that someone else would never be in her place, but the heroine knows that as soon as he meets Serena, his opinion will change. The girl tries to convince the Emperor to marry her because they just spent the night together, and in the future, he will be able to meet someone better than her. To which Theo replies that for him, there is no one better than Judith because she is the only one his heart desires. The Emperor says that the heroine must remember that he is not going to let her go under any circumstances. And then the heroine's father burst into the imperial palace, and although the guards tried to detain him, they failed. And then Joseph Pelgrim notices his beloved daughter, who wrote in a letter that she was going to hide from the Emperor in his arms. As a result, the entire Pelgrim family gathered at the same table with His Majesty, and although there was a lot of food there, no one could take a bite in such an atmosphere. The father of the family was sure that Judith had done something wrong before the Emperor, and asking what exactly, Joseph offered to take his daughter's punishment upon himself. The father was about to say what exactly the heroine had to be punished for when she began to cough to muffle the young man's words. Everyone sitting at the table immediately feared for Judith's health, and the Emperor even demanded to call a doctor, but the girl hastened to report that she was fine. As a result, the heroine realized that this conversation could not be avoided, and she herself admitted that on the day of the masquerade ball, she spent the night with His Majesty. With this confession, Judith shocked all members of her family, and her father even asked what exactly she had done and with whom, to which the heroine only apologized because it seemed to her that now everyone was disappointed in her. But as it turned out, the father was only dissatisfied with the Emperor, asking him how he dared to spend the night with his daughter. In response to this, the girl began to defend Theo, explaining that she was the first to approach His Majesty, so she herself was to blame for the whole situation. But the heroine's brothers did not believe her words. They decided that it was the Emperor who forced her to say so, and Kieran even called Theo a vile thief. Judith began to worry very much about her family, because they didn't seem to understand that they were arguing with a cruel tyrant. To all the accusations of the Pelgrim family, the Emperor replied that it does not matter how it happened, because the fact that the heroine took his innocence remains a fact in any case. His Majesty is sensitive to the concept of chastity, and therefore is going to marry Judith after one night spent together. The heroine understands that her father will never win this argument no matter what he says. The Emperor said that he was ready to hold the wedding even tomorrow, which made Joseph very angry, and he was about to start cursing in response, but the girl was able to calm him down. But the father still did not intend to give his daughter into the clutches of this tyrant, and therefore said that at the present time there is nothing reprehensible in the fact that unmarried people make love, and since it was by mutual consent, it means that Judith has not made any mistake in front of the emperor, so the entire pilgrim family is about to leave the palace. But the tyrant was not going to let Judith go so easily, and, therefore, reminded Sir Pilgrim of the promise he had made, which states that Joseph will repay his majesty for his kindness, and as payment, the emperor wants Sir to accept him as his son-in-law. Of course, the father was against it, saying that his majesty had gone crazy, and the girl, meanwhile, was worried that at this rate, the Pilgrim family would be accused of high treason. Then the girl decided to take matters into her own hands, shouting to everyone present to calm down. And that really helped calm everyone down because they started thinking about how cute Judith was. And the heroine decided that since she and the emperor did not know each other very well, she would come to meet with him every day, and he would then decide whether he still agreed to the wedding or not. And when the father tried to say something against the girl's plan, she replied that objections would not be accepted because the heroine must be held accountable for her actions. And so that the father and brothers would not be so upset, a girl with a sweet expression on her face, using a system of slightly tilting her head with an expressive look, asked them to go home. As soon as Judith's household calmed down, she immediately began to get them out of the palace as quickly as possible before they said anything unnecessary. Afterwards, the heroine turned around and saw Theo, who was very upset because the girl had left. However, you can't slack off just because of his sad face, so Judith confidently told His Majesty that they would see each other tomorrow. Standing in front of the mirror, the girl asked herself if she had done everything right, because she was afraid that she might die because of this, even before the events of the original began to unfold. But after that, Judith pulls herself together, because in the original story, the heroine was killed because she interfered with Theo and Serena's relationship. And in order to survive, the girl must protect the love line of Theo and Serena because this is her only way out. So for now, she and the Emperor seem to have a short-term romance, which Judith is going to enjoy to the fullest. But the girl is still surprised by the fact that His Majesty is much softer than she imagined, because in the original Theo was extremely rude and harsh before meeting Serena. Judith's thoughts are interrupted by the brothers who decided to visit the girl's room, who was still a little embarrassed about what happened during the day. Unexpectedly, Ludwig invites his sister to teach her magic, to which the girl reacts incredibly joyfully. It turns out that the Pelgrim family is not so simple, because among its ancestors there were representatives of the demonic race, and therefore the descendants of the family are born with strength exceeding human, as in the case of their father and Kieran. Judith's body also inherited the power of the demonic race, but different from the power of her brother and father. And the girl's strength lies in the senseless, in her opinion, ability to absorb magic. Judith believes that she has no talent for magic, to which her brother begins to explain to her that this ability needs to be developed for her own safety. All these classes began to be carried out due to the fact that the brothers do not trust the Emperor and want the heroine to be able to protect herself from him. But in any case, the girl is glad that the brothers are not angry with her because of what happened earlier. While Judith was returning from training with a light heart, she met her father. The father is very worried about his daughter because from tomorrow she will have to meet every day with the Emperor, whom the Sir considers a wild beast. But the girl tries to calm him down, saying that everything will be fine. The heroine wanted to say something to her father about what happened, but Joseph interrupted her, apologizing for scaring her. Sir Pelgrim reassured his daughter that there was nothing wrong with dating someone at her age, and also added that no matter what choice she made, she would forever remain the most dear person to the family. Judith became convinced of how much she was loved and told her father that she was glad to be his daughter because thanks to her family, the heroine had nothing to fear. Meanwhile, in the palace, the Emperor could not concentrate on his work because he was absorbed in his thoughts. And then His Majesty demanded from his assistant Alpin that he quickly obtain the Tear of Hysteria. The Tear of Hysteria is the most burnt diamond ring ever sold on the black market. The assistant was pleased with this assignment because if His Majesty demands a ring, it means that he is going to propose marriage to the girl. But all Alpin's joy subsided the moment he was told to find cherry trees that would be in bloom. And the Emperor did not want to listen to any explanations that all the cherries had bloomed last month and would bloom again only in a year. According to His Majesty, if there is something impossible, then you need to make it possible. Sitting alone, Chiron thinks that His Majesty has never had any interest in women, and then suddenly he has his eye on Judith. But then, All his thoughts disappeared when none other than His Majesty himself, whom his elder brother had just been thinking about, came to visit him. Looking at the Emperor, Sir Chiron dreamed only of how to destroy him, and Theo felt how he was treated. Although in his thoughts, Chiron had only hatred for Theo, who for some unknown reason had pressed himself against Sir, he could only speak friendly words towards the Emperor. As it turned out, His Majesty arrived so early to pick up Judith. The older brother tried to stop the Emperor, saying that the girl was still sleeping, but this did not stop Theo, and he, on the contrary, did not mind looking at the heroine's sleeping face. To this, Chiron replied that Judith could not sleep normally in the presence of other people, but the Emperor disputed this because the heroine slept sweetly with him. All the servants watching the argument between the two young men prayed that the girl would wake up quickly and calm them down. The servants' pleas were heard, and Judith suddenly woke up, as if she sensed that someone urgently needed her. Judith called Maria to help her get dressed, but no one responded, and the girl was very surprised that no one was there. Afterwards, the heroine saw the maid and asked where everyone had gone, and she was informed that His Majesty, the Emperor, had arrived early in the morning to take Judith to the imperial palace. Everyone gathered in one room, and so the girl immediately ran to the meeting, wondering what her household was up to. As it turned out, her brothers showed the Emperor the gifts that the girl gave them. Among these gifts was the first picture that Judith painted of Ludwig, and His Majesty admired how the heroine expressed the whole essence in a couple of strokes. Then there was the doll that the sister gave to her brother for his birthday, and Theo also liked it, who said that he definitely prefers freeforms that go beyond the mold. The brothers also boasted of a bag of cookies that the heroine had prepared herself, and although they had eaten the treat a long time ago, they kept the bag as a keepsake. The Emperor wanted to touch this bag, but he was forbidden. Otherwise, fingerprints would remain. His Majesty was so jealous of Judith's brothers because they have so many memorabilia associated with her that he also wanted to have something as a keepsake and therefore called an artist to paint a portrait of the heroes. Painting a portrait takes a long time, so Judith's eyes began to droop due to the fact that she had been sitting still for so long. In the end, the girl could not resist and fell asleep leaning against the Emperor. Noticing this, His Majesty called Alpin and began to say something to him, which greatly frightened the artist. The artist began to think that the Emperor was angry because he was drawing for too long, but this is surprising because His Majesty himself asked to draw slowly. Theo told the artist to finish the painting and then bring it to his office while he took Judith in his arms and hurried away. Ludwig, meanwhile, went hunting, and none of his assistants understood why he was so fierce today. The reason was that the Emperor very brazenly took Judith to his imperial palace, which angered the heroine's brothers. Then suddenly, a bird flew to Ludwig and brought a letter, which somehow surprised the young man. After Judith fell asleep, the Emperor brought her to bed and lay down next to her, admiring the beauty of the sleeping girl. And although His Majesty liked the view that opened before him, he still dreamed that the heroine would wake up quickly. As if sensing someone else's gaze, the girl opened her eyes and saw the Emperor in front of her, who asked if the girl slept well. But then Judith and His Majesty were interrupted by the Lord of the Magic Tower, Sir Ludwig, asking for an audience with the Emperor. Ludwig burst in with a question to his sister about whether nothing had happened, to which the girl replied that everything was fine. The unfriendly Emperor clarified what kind of important question the Lord of the Magic Tower wanted to ask. And Judith's brother said that in the morning, he was informed that chimeras had been discovered in the forest. One of these chimeras was killed outright, but the other escaped and is now being hunted down. And only one person in this novel can cope with such creatures, and this is the second prince known to the world as the Deceased, who is also the main villain under the name Saffron Art. The second prince was the illegitimate son of the late emperor and his mistress. However, he was an ordinary person unlike Theo, who inherited the power of the imperial family. And so, Mother Yarda, who wanted to make her son heir to the throne, tried to change his abilities with the help of black magic. Due to a difficult childhood, Iart was broken, and after the death of his tough mother, all his anger transferred to Theo. After all, Theo had everything that Ert did not have, and he also got everything without any effort. He was just born under a lucky star, unlike his younger brother. To gain the power of a dragon like his older brother Ert, Iart devoted himself to the study of chimeras. But after his research was discovered by Theo, Iart set fire to his palace to destroy traces of his deeds associated with black magic, and after all this, he disappeared. Although Iart was guilty of his actions, and also left Theo with the mark of a tyrant who killed his younger brother, Judith still felt sorry for him because the reason for his actions lies in the environment in which he grew up. Then the girl remembered her past life in which she also had an inferiority complex, because of which she suffered. Ludwig said that because of the situation, he hoped that he would see the emperor more often from now on, hinting that he would now make surprise visits and check on how his sister was doing. His Majesty responded to this that he was touched by the Sir's devotion, to which he replied that he was grateful for this. But although they had a nice dialogue, it was clear from the atmosphere that there could be no question of any friendliness. Then Ludwig noticed that it was already quite late, so he would pick up his sister and she would go home. Already in the carriage, the brother asked Judith what should be done if they tried to touch her, to which the girl replied that she would need to break this person's face with the help of magic. And while Ludwig explained how to properly defend himself, Judith hoped that her brother would not take her away like this every day. But in the end, it turned out that the father and brothers, without the heroine's knowledge, had already agreed that from now on they would pick her up from the imperial palace every day at 5 o'clock in the evening. Although the heroine is glad that at least in this life her family takes care of her, sometimes they are overprotective of her. And as soon as the girl gets stressed, she sneaks out of the house at night to buy limited edition chocolate buns. The heroine was afraid that at such a late hour all the buns would already be sold out, but she was very lucky. And then Judith meets a mysterious young man. The stranger stared at the girl, and she does not understand why exactly. Then he comes up and says that he will pay for the bun that is on the heroine's tray. At first, Judith did not understand why the young man did this because they were strangers, but later she decided that he simply fell in love with her at first sight. However, while the girl was in thought, the stranger simply grabbed the bag of buns and quickly left. But Judith didn't want to just leave everything like that, so she ran after the young man, shouting after him that she was the first to grab this bun. The girl even grabbed the stranger by the clothes, intending to return her bun back. And then Judith noticed how handsome the guy was who took her delicacy. The stranger was not going to return the bun, saying that it belonged to him because he paid for it. When the girl said that the guy had acted impolitely, he noticed that it was much more impolite to grab him at random and take out his anger on him. If the heroine wants to return her package back, then she must ask in such a way that the stranger would want to give it to her. These words made Judith very angry, and she began to swear at the stranger with renewed vigor and even hit him in the leg. But this only hurt the girl herself because the guy seemed to have inserted an iron rod into his leg. As a result, Judith told the stranger to eat his own bun and not choke, and she began to move away before the man got angry. It turns out that all this was arranged because the stranger was wondering what kind of woman the emperor was like. After this, the young man entered the room where he was noticed by a certain person wiping glasses. And then this man turned to the stranger, calling him Ert, and asking if everything went according to plan. The man received a negative answer to this question because Ert thought that the girl would be stupid and could be controlled, but she turned out to be a tough nut to crack. After this, it became clear that the heroine would have to be persuaded in other ways, so Ayart asked the man to call Verdi. Also, the younger brother Theo was asked what to do with the package now, to which he replied that there was no longer a need for it, so they could throw it away. On his next visit to the emperor, he had work to do, so while His Majesty went about his business, Judith just sat nearby and read a book. But in the end, Theo decided that he wanted to spend time with the girl and not work. The emperor told Judith that he was just tired, and she suggested that he go and lie down to rest, thinking that it would be much more comfortable without him. But as it turned out, Theo did not leave but lay down on the girl's lap, which she herself did not expect. Taking a closer look, Judith realizes that His Majesty is not going to flirt with her because he looks very tired. The heroine asked if the emperor slept well today, to which he agreed. If this is all because of work, then Judith is ready not to interfere and leave now so that His Majesty can continue to do his business. But as it turned out, the emperor did not sleep because of thoughts about the girl and not because of work. With these words, the emperor greatly embarrassed the heroine, and she even began to doubt that the hero had never been in a relationship before. Then, unexpectedly, Theo says something that Judith did not expect, because he admits to the heroine that he wants to hug her. Because of her panic, Judith says that she needs moral preparation, and then adds that Theo is tired, so they can discuss the matter another time. To this, the emperor replies that he no longer wants to sleep, but the girl does not agree with him because sleep is important, and its lack has a bad effect on the body. In the end, Theo agrees with Judith and decides to sleep, while the girl thinks about what she likes about the emperor. Although it is clear that His Majesty is interested in the heroine, she does not understand why exactly, as they hardly know each other. After all, if he is interested in Judith only because she is his first woman, then this does not suit her. Although the heroine understands that they will break up as soon as Serena appears on the horizon, she would like to build a normal romantic relationship until that moment. And perhaps in this case, he will not hate Judith so much as to want to kill her. Suddenly, Judith notices what looks like a ring on Theo's neck and wants to take a closer look at it while the Emperor sleeps. Then the heroine begins to unbutton the buttons on His Majesty's shirt so that the ring can be seen better. At this unfortunate moment, Theo opens his eyes and looks at Judith. Then the girl begins to try to justify herself so that the Emperor does not think that she is just trying to undress him. But His Majesty did not listen to excuses and immediately took action. The Emperor decided that this was a sign from Judith that she had already prepared herself mentally. To this, the girl replied that she did not want a relationship in which they would desire each other only physically. The Emperor said that he liked everything about Judith, to which she replied that she only liked Theo's body so far, and therefore she wanted to get to know him better. According to His Majesty, if the heroine does not want something, she just needs to say so, and he will not do anything against her will. After this, the Emperor apologized for rushing things and extended his hand to Judith, asking if the girl would allow him to hold her hand. To this, the heroine replied that Theo can hold her hand as much as his heart desires. The heroes held hands and smiled at each other because an important moment had happened for their relationship. And then the Emperor said that he has one more request for Judith, namely, whether the girl will go on a picnic with him. Every year, there is an event called the hunting competition, and Judith always missed it to avoid meeting Theo. But now, there is nothing to be afraid of, so she can attend it. When the heroine returned home, her father immediately met her with the words that if she did not want to meet with this brat, meaning the Emperor, then she did not need to force herself. The daughter tried to reassure Sir Pilgrim that everything was fine, nothing bad had been done to her, and she did not force herself to go to meetings. Contrary to Judith's expectations, His Majesty always listens to her, and now the girl just wants to get to know Theo better. If something happens to the heroine, her father will be the first to know about it to ultimately punish the Emperor. Then Joseph realized that he had worried in vain because, although Sir does not like Theo, his daughter made her own decision, and he must respect her choice. Judith's father is sure that his daughter will be able to figure everything out on her own. He just keeps forgetting that she is already quite big. But the heroine is not angry with Sir Pilgrim because she understands that he is simply worried about her. Joseph now understands how Leah's father felt when Sir said he wanted to marry her. Lila was Joseph's wife, and he now thinks that his beloved would be surprised at how much their daughter has grown. The day has arrived for the hunting competition in the Imperial Palace, and this event is aimed at maintaining harmony between the imperial family and the nobles. The winner of this competition is the one who catches the most game in a day. Before the start of the competition, each woman gives one of the participants a kiss, thereby wishing good luck. And men, in turn, give the woman they like a bouquet of flowers that they collected during the hunt, thereby confessing their feelings. That's why this event is so popular among girls and boys. And then the heroine thought about why Theo invited her there. It turns out that it is possible that the Emperor will want to give the heroine a bouquet of flowers, thereby showing his sympathy. And this will be a public announcement that Judith and Theo are dating. Also, the girl will have to give His Majesty a kiss for good luck. In a past life, the heroine died without ever having an affair. This means that Theo is Judith's first boyfriend. And in order to take a little break from her thoughts, the girl again went to the city to buy her favorite buns. This time, Judith was lucky because there were a lot of buns left, and the heroine decided to buy everything and then share it with the others. As Judith walked back to the carriage with a large bag of buns, she thought that perhaps she had been too greedy. And then she realized that she could not open the carriage door because her hands were busy with the package. Then Judith began to call Jason to help her open the door, as he usually does, but for some reason, he was not there this time. But then an unfamiliar man approached her and opened the door for her. But from the expression on the stranger's face, it seemed that he was not just a passerby. He wanted to help the girl in trouble. Judith doesn't understand why the carriage is shaking so much today, as if they were traveling on some other road. And then the carriage stopped, and the heroine was surprised that this time they arrived at the castle too quickly. As it turned out, the coachman of this carriage was not Jason, whom the girl kept calling, but a stranger who helped her with the door. So Judith realized that she had simply been kidnapped and asked what the man's goal was. And then the stranger said that the heroine did not need to know all this, and then tried to silence her with the help of magic. But he didn't expect that Judith had the power to prevent others' magic from affecting her. While the man is confused, the girl has a chance to escape. Then Judith remembered the spell that her brother taught her and decided to try to use it. It turned out to be a lightning spell, which, although not difficult, can quickly unsettle the enemy. However, it is difficult to aim lightning because it has such enormous speed. Judith collected her thoughts and did everything as her brother taught her, attacking the enemy. Fortunately, the girl did everything right, so now she has the opportunity to escape. Although the girl managed to leave, she had absolutely no idea where she was or where to go now. And while Judith stood and thought about what to do next, the man came to his senses and managed to grab the heroine again. The kidnapper threatened the girl that if she tried to use magic again, he would break her wrists. While the girl was mentally praying for help from at least someone, suddenly someone hit the stranger who grabbed her. The stranger asked Judith if she was hurt, and as soon as she raised her head, she realized that it was none other than the young man who had saved her, who had taken her bun. And then the girl asked her savior how he ended up in this place. Then she asked about her kidnapper, and the stranger who stole the bun reassured the girl, saying that the criminal was only unconscious but alive. In the end, Judith simply thanked the hero for saving her and said that if he wanted a reward, he could come to Pelgrim Castle. To which the man asked if she could at least find the way home on her own and invited the girl to follow him. The heroine had no other choice but to follow the stranger, but she warned that if they tried to take her to a strange place, she would scream. The savior did not lie and actually escorted Judith home, and in gratitude, she told him to come the next day for a generous reward, but the man refused. And since the girl is so grateful, shouldn't she, in this case, visit the hero herself and not ask him to come himself? Then Judith asked for the stranger's address so that she could later bring him a chest of gold coins, but the man refused this too. As a reward, the stranger asked only that the girl give him a bun from that store the next time they met. Because of the conversation, Judith didn't even notice that they had already reached the main gate. The girl started to move home, but then decided to ask the stranger's name. But when she turned around, she saw that he had already left. At the door, Judith met her father and brothers, who were very worried about her, and James was found in one of the warehouses. The emperor searched the entire empire in search of the culprit of the kidnapping, but the search was unsuccessful. Thanks to the girl's tearful persuasion, Jason was not fired, but his salary was cut, and Judith herself was put under house arrest. The heroine was very ashamed in front of Jason, and she was also worried that for some time she would no longer be able to go to the store for buns, and she hoped that the stranger would not wait for her. Meanwhile, Ert came to his chimeras, whom he was not at all afraid of, and then a man approached Ert, who said that he had dealt with the higher bandit. This man also told Theo's younger brother that Judith really had the power of nullifying magic, which surprised him very much. Art clarified that this power does not cancel, but absorbs the enemy's magic, and this power belonged to the now extinct demonic race. Everyone knows that Duke Pelgrim and his eldest son inherited the power of the demonic clan, but it turned out that the daughter did too, just from a different clan. Ayart ordered his assistant to continue observing the woman but carefully so as not to be caught, and the master himself was still thinking that the emperor's beloved was a woman with magical powers that no one could surpass. Ayart said to himself that Theodore had something that he so passionately wanted to get. The next day, Judith was in a great mood because she was finally going out into the world after such a long time, thanks to the hunting competition. Then she saw the emperor, who was beautifully dressed in honor of such an event. The girl was surprised that His Majesty arrived so early, although usually members of the imperial family are the last to arrive. And in response, the heroine heard that Theo just wanted to see her as soon as possible. After that, Judith felt many eyes on her, not only from her brothers and father. The girl gave a good luck kiss to her brother Kieran and asked him to be careful. Afterward, she approached her father, asking him not to overexert himself too much. Meanwhile, Theo stood completely alone because the rest of his family was no longer alive. Then Judith approached the emperor with the words that she wanted to give His Majesty a blessing for good luck. In the end, the girl dared and still gave Theo a kiss. After this, the emperor decided that since the heroine kissed him, it meant that Judith gave permission to her lips. But the girl said that it was only about blessings for good luck, and Theo simply misunderstood her. And when Judith was about to leave, His Majesty stopped her and kissed her too, explaining that he also simply blessed her for good luck. After some time, the hunting competition began, and all the men ran to hunt. People were already wondering what would win, and many were sure that it would be the emperor because this year he came with his beloved. Judith noticed how many eyes were directed at her because everyone already wanted to know the story of her and Theo. Then Isabella, the daughter of the Marquis of Leon, came up to meet the heroine, and as it turned out, in the novel, this girl was Judith's assistant. In the original story, Isabella liked Theo and was jealous of Lady Pilgrim with all her heart, and Judith in the novel cleverly plays on Lady Lion's feelings and weaknesses in order to frame Serena. And the fair Serena saved Isabella when she is in danger, and after that, they become friends. Judith understands that meeting the girl will not bring her anything good, because later she will have a knife stuck in her back, so she plans to stay away from Isabella. But things don't go according to plan, as usual, when Lady Lion invites Judith to a tea party. And so it turned out that the girls were seated next to each other, which was also not part of Lady Pilgrim's plans. And at that moment, when Isabella wanted to give the heroine a cup of tea, she seemed to deliberately drop it on herself, and later tried to make Judith guilty of this. And the girl held on with all her strength so as not to start arguing with Lady Lion. But in the end, Judith could not restrain herself, and said that it was truly a childish prank on Isabella's part. And then the Emperor interrupted the girls' quarrel and called his beloved because they were going to go on a picnic. Then Judith said goodbye to the other girls to go on a picnic with His Majesty, who promised to show the heroine something. And as soon as the couple left, the other ladies immediately began to discuss them, noticing the tenderness with which Theo looked at Judith. While the heroes were walking, Judith thought about the fact that the Emperor is actually a tyrant, and she constantly forgets about it. Afterward, the heroine asked His Majesty if he could spend time with her so calmly, because he needed to establish contact between the imperial family and the nobility, to which Theo remarks that he is actively involved in this, hinting at contact between him and Judith. When the girl asked where what Theo wanted to show her was, he told her that they were almost there and then pointed to some place. And then Judith notices the indescribable beauty, surprised at how beautiful this place is. His Majesty said that he originally intended to pick a few buds, but in the end, he felt that a couple of flowers would not be enough. The heroine was surprised that now the flower field completely belongs to her, to which Theo replied that if she wants, then the entire empire will be hers. But Judith replied that a field of flowers would be enough for her, and then she thought that she needed to somehow change the topic of marriage. And then the heroine noticed that the Emperor was wearing the same pendant that she noticed last time, so she asked Theo about it. Judith said that it was nothing special. It just reminded her of something she lost as a child, and so Theo invited the girl to look for herself. This ring was exactly like the one Lady Pilgrim had lost, and she asked where the Emperor had gotten it. And then Theo asked if Judith really didn't remember anything because she herself gave him this ring 14 years ago. And at that moment, the girl seemed to hear the original plot bursting at the seams. But even after His Majesty's words, the heroine could not remember how and where it happened. Judith asked if she really just gave this ring as a gift, and the Emperor replied that at that moment she also proposed marriage. This is all very similar to a lie, because what could a girl do this 14 years ago that the plot has changed so much? As it turned out, from that moment, His Majesty began to think about Judith constantly, dreaming of meeting her somewhere. And then the girl realized that since the Emperor had kept her ring all this time, it turns out that he had been looking for Judith all these years. And then the heroine decided to kiss His Majesty again as a sign that she had proposed marriage to him, although she did not remember it. When the couple returned back, they noticed that something had happened. Then Judith decided to return to the rest of the girls again, while the Emperor went to sort things out. And then, while the heroine was returning to the others, she noticed Isabella walking towards the hunting grounds. Lady Lion walked around alone, swearing at Judith, and kicked a stone which hit something with a strange sound. And as soon as the girl raised her head, she saw an animal unknown to her, which was much larger in size than herself. Then Judith hurried to help Isabella, who used her magic. Lady Pilgrim managed to set the monster on fire, which nearly harmed Isabella. Judith then asked if the girl was okay, saying she was very scared. While the girls were able to gain time, they had to immediately run away from there to the others. But as it turned out, not all opponents were defeated, because other chamas began to approach the hero. Judith then ordered Lady Lion to run as quickly as possible, while she tried to distract the chamas with magic. And then Isabella admitted that the tea which she deliberately spilled on herself has a hallucinogenic effect on animals, so that the Emperor would later save her from them. At first, Judith began to scold the girl, but then she realized that now was not the best time and, apologizing, grabbed Lady Lion by the dress. Theo's lover tore off a piece of the dress on which tea had been spilled in order to divert all the attention of the chimeras to herself so that Isabella could escape. Lady Lion must first get out of the forest safely so that she can immediately call the knights while Judith fights. And while Isabella hurried for help, Judith was left alone with the ferocious monsters. While waiting for the knights, the girl created a protective barrier, but she didn't know how long she could hold out like that, and then she began to think that Isabella might not have called anyone for help. The heroine's strength began to dry up, and she had already decided that most likely only death awaited her ahead. The last thing Judith had time to think about before the barrier disappeared was that she did not want to die like this. But then the heroine heard someone calling her, and turning around, saw Theo. Fortunately, the Emperor arrived in time and was already in a hurry to help the girl. Thanks to his sword, His Majesty was able to drive away all the chimeras that surrounded Judith. This is how the heroine saw the power of the imperial family, which Theo owns. Having defeated the monsters, the Emperor immediately rushed to his beloved with questions about whether she was hurt. And then His Majesty told Judith that first she should think about herself, and then about others. Judith noticed that the Emperor was much more scared than she was, so she apologized for making him worry. Theo came to her, but not to kill her, but rather to save her. As soon as the girl came out of the forest, her father and brother immediately ran to her because they were also very worried. And then members of the Pilgrim family thanked the Emperor for being able to save Judith. After this, His Majesty ordered Kirin to take the knights and find out how the Chimas ended up next to them. In the end, Kirin found out that it seemed that the Chamas were simply running past and smelled the aroma of the Rexus flower that came from the tea. Then the Emperor asked why Lady Lion made tea from such a dangerous flower and brought it to the event. The Marquis Leon responded that someone was simply planning to harm his daughter because she was the one who was attacked by the monsters. And then the Marquis said that he would like to personally find out who was behind the attempt to harm his daughter and ask the Emperor's permission for this. His Majesty gives his permission to the Marquis. And it turns out that Isabella's father realized that she was to blame for everything that happened, and so he began to scold her for the fact that she still couldn't grow up. The father scolded the girl for the fact that because of her, the future of her younger brother was almost destroyed, not at all thinking about Isabella herself, who could also suffer. As soon as the enraged Marquis left Lady Leon, Judith came instead and invited the girl to talk about what had happened. Isabella thought that Lady Pell was going to interrogate her, but instead, Judith began asking questions about the girl's health and well-being. And then Judith thanked the lady for running as fast as she could and calling for help in time. After this, the heroine was called by her family, and she, saying goodbye to Isabella, wished her a good rest after a hard day. And at the end, she added that Lady Lion would never try something so dangerous again. The event has ended, so Judith and her father are already getting ready to go home. But then the Emperor called out to the girl, and then said that he would accompany the heroine to the carriage. Judith said goodbye to Theo, who wished her good night and sweet dreams. Having seen off his beloved, His Majesty set off to figure out how and where the chimera entered from. Experiments with black magic were found near the northwestern border of the hunting grounds, and it seems that the chimeras escaped from there. After receiving the information, the Emperor asked Kirin to try to find Urt, even though he was considered dead. Recently, there have been many reports about the discovery of traces of experiments with black magic, so it can be safely assumed that the second prince is alive. After all, there must be someone who leads all these dark magicians, and with a high probability, this is Urt. And since the second prince is already gathering supporters around himself, then the Emperor cannot sit idly by in this situation. When His Majesty was asked what he would do with Urt if he was caught, the Emperor admitted that he would have to kill his younger brother. Judith and her father had already returned home, and Ludwig immediately ran to them, asking about what happened at the hunting competition. But since the girl was sleeping, the father invited his son to talk outside. Sir told Ludwig that it was now time to remove the seal placed on Judith. Joseph said that the girl should know about her strength, and he does not want to relive what happened 14 years ago. It turned out that 14 years ago, little Judith disappeared for half a day and was then found unconscious. Then it became known that the heroine had inherited the abilities of the demonic clan, and therefore she could absorb magic by touching the body and then turn it into her own mana. That time Judith suffered greatly because she absorbed too much mana, which caused a surge in her power. Surprisingly, the heroine was attacked using a spell that could kill a person. It was on that day that they decided to seal Miss Pilgrim's mana until she was able to control it herself. But along with the mana, the memories of who attacked the girl were also sealed, and Judith really forgot everything, and other family members did not pretend that they knew anything in order to protect the girl. Although then, the heroine would be able to use stronger magic, it was questionable whether she could handle her power. Kirin also joined the dialogue, saying that he agreed with his father's thoughts. After all, just recently, Judith was on the verge of death, so she needs strength to stand up for herself. And then Ludwig agreed to remove the seal from Judith. Thus, enormous power returned to the heroine again. The next day, as soon as the girl woke up, the Emperor immediately ran up to her to ask how she was feeling. But Judith was the only one happy about His Majesty's visit, while her brothers showed their displeasure with all their appearance. As a result, all three men began to argue about who woke up the girl. Like any other argument, Judith was able to calm everyone down by sending the brothers to the dining room and Theo to the room. Every time the Emperor calls for his beloved, some kind of commotion begins in her house, so in the future, she asked him not to come. While Judith scolded His Majesty, he smiled, admiring her face, which made the girl feel embarrassed. The Emperor noticed that the heroine looked tired because yesterday she had used too much mana, and then he picked her up so that the doctor could examine her as soon as possible. Hearing Theo's plans to take the girl to the imperial palace, the father tried to stop him, thinking that it was better for his daughter to rest at home. But it is useless to argue with the Emperor because in any case, he will do as he wants. And as soon as the carriage with the couple left, Ludwig remembered that he had forgotten to say that he had printed Judith's mana. After some time, the Emperor was busy with work, but the heroine noticed that he was constantly looking at her while she was sitting nearby. The heroine reassured Theo that she was completely fine and not to worry so much. Although Judith said that everything was fine with her, in fact, she felt heaviness throughout her body and really wanted to sleep. His Majesty finally finished his work, and at the same moment saw that the girl had fallen asleep. Theo noticed how his beloved's condition had changed because she didn't even want to eat and had been nodding off all day and was also experiencing heaviness throughout her body. Then the Emperor decided that Judith was carrying a child from him. Later, the girl woke up and was very surprised to find herself in bed, eventually guessing that it was Theo who carried her. Judith apologized for dozing off, but in response, His Majesty began to say that at such a time, she needed to be especially careful and not overexert herself. While the Emperor was saying all this, the girl did not understand what he meant. While Ludwig was trying to break into the imperial palace to pick up his sister, Theo began to tell Judith that she was pregnant. As soon as he got to the heroine, he immediately took everyone's attention, wondering if anything terrible had happened to Judith. Afterwards, Ludwig said that his sister needed to be especially attentive to her body, and then Theo was finally convinced of his guesses. Ludwig said that he was already picking up the girl, and at that moment she began to wait for the altercation that happens every time. But contrary to Judith's expectations, His Majesty only told the heroine's brother to keep a close eye on his sister and quickly bring her home. And since the beloved is already carrying a child, Theo should organize a wedding ceremony as soon as possible. When the brother and sister were left alone, Ludwig again asked the girl if there had been any changes for the worse in her body. And then the brother invited the girl to sit down somewhere to tell her something important. Afterwards, the magician asked his sister for her hand, warning that she would now feel unwell. The heroine's stomach was so twisted that she felt like she was going to vomit. It turned out that Ludwig simply cast a healing spell on his sister so that her condition would improve. After this, the young man admitted that the girl's ability was not to nullify magic, but to absorb magic and turn it into her own mana. He also talked about the seal that he recently got rid of. It was because of this that Judith felt unwell, because the flow of mana became unstable and affected the girl's body. The heroine was surprised that she did not know such a significant thing, and then they explained to her that memories were sealed along with mana. It turned out that Theo's situation happened around the same time as the girl's disappearance, so Judith began to try to remember what happened to her. Ludwig wanted to take his sister home, but then they came running to him with a message that the young man urgently needed to go to the magic tower, so Judith would have to go alone. There were many people in the square where the lady was passing, and she also wanted to join them, but she promised her brother to return home. But Judith couldn't resist, and still decided to pop into the store for a while where she buys her favorite buns. And then, among the crowd, the heroine noticed a man who saved her from the kidnapper. Then Judith quickly ran after him, that even the guards lost sight of her. As a result, the girl was still able to catch up with her savior again, grabbing his clothes. But unfortunately, it was not the one she thought about. And then some guy bumped into Judith, accusing the girl of standing in the middle of the street. And then someone grabbed this boy by the hand, saying that he had to return something to the one he crashed into. And as it turned out, this man was Judith's savior whom she was running after. Then the girl asked the man how he ended up here. As it turned out, it was not just a guy who crashed into Judith, but a thief who stole the heroine's bracelet. The man again helped the girl, and then began to threaten the thief with punishment. But Judith stopped him because she was the victim, so it was up to her to decide the boy's fate. This is how the heroes learned that the boy was stealing in order to buy medicine for his younger sister. Then Judith offered to pay for these drugs if the boy promised not to steal anymore. After the boy ran away with the money, the girl's savior told her that the thief was most likely telling her a fictitious story. To this, Judith replied that if he lied, then that was even better, because it meant that there was no sick child. And from the boy's clothes, it was clear that he had a hard life in any case. The heroine is glad that she can correct at least something in this unjust world. While Judith was communicating with the man, her bodyguard managed to find her. Having caught up with the girl, the guard began to ask her why she left, and also added that he had to look for her for a very long time. Then the heroine told the bodyguard that she simply noticed the familiar face of the one who saved her, but he was no longer nearby. Meanwhile, the heroine was thinking about the fact that there were more guards around the girl, which meant that it would now be more difficult to get to her. As it turned out, Theo's younger brother wanted to duplicate Judith's abilities, but this required her blood. Art himself took on this task because the heroine is personally acquainted with him, so it will be easiest for him to get close to her. The man needs Lady Pilgrim's power in order to clone Theo's abilities. Art doesn't understand why, then he just understands Judith without taking what he needs. And then the young man has an attack during which he sees his own mother, who does not let her son go even after her death. The vision said that Judith would no longer be kind to Yart when she found out who he was. And in the northern part of the empire, a letter from the emperor himself arrived at the castle of the Marchess Spencer, in which he wrote that he was asking the Marchess for a couple of cherry trees in bloom for the wedding, because in the north, flowering occurs later. The Marchess was surprised that Theo was getting married, because before that, he had never been interested in women. Although Spencer thought this request was stupid, she still ordered that no more than 10 cherry trees be selected for the emperor. The Marchess was ready to do this in order to quickly see what kind of woman fell into the heart of His Majesty. Later, it turns out that Marchioness Spencer is going to hold a banquet in the capital, and only girls were invited to it. The emperor guesses that Judith should also receive such a letter, and advises her to immediately refuse the invitation. Elith Spencer is the current Marchess Spencer, and Theo's only maternal cousin. The entire Spencer family, except for Elith herself and her newborn nephew, was executed due to accusations of helping Theo's mother and participating in the poisoning of Iart. And even though everyone thought that after this, the Spencer family was finished, Elith was able to convince everyone by joining the knights and earning great glory. In the original story, Serena respected this character, and she, in turn, considered Judith to be nothing more than an eyesore. The heroine guessed that Mayor Spencer simply found out about her relationship with the emperor and therefore just wants to study her. Judith understands that there is no point in refusing the invitation because sooner or later they will meet anyway, but Theo continues to insist on refusing. The girl also notices that lately the emperor has been very worried about her health and therefore thinks that Ludwig simply told him everything. His Majesty throws out the phrase that his beloved will have to go through another 9 months, which surprises the heroine. Then Judith clarified whether Theo was talking about the seal that was placed on Herma. But the emperor was not talking about the seal, but about their child, which the heroine, in his opinion, carries under her heart. Then Judith realized why Theo had been acting so strange lately. While the heroine was in the imperial palace, an invitation came for her from Marchioness Spencer, as His Majesty had expected. Ludwig noticed this letter and also suggested that Judith refuse the invitation. As it turns out, Marchioness Spencer has a very strained relationship with Kieran. That's how Judith found out that her brother dated Eled about 10 years ago. But they didn't even last a week, so the heroine didn't even know about it. And for this reason, it is better for Karen and Eled not to meet, because then a very tense atmosphere begins to hover in the air. So Mayor Spencer can take out all her anger on Judith, which is why the heroine began to worry even more. And the fact that Kieran left the mayor's precisely because of Judith, in order to spend more time with his sister, also makes the situation worse. No matter how afraid the girl was, she still accepted the invitation and went to the banquet without her brothers. Judith understood that her every action would result in the evaluation of the Pilgrim family, so she was very worried. But in the end, the girl took her will into her fist and decided that she would not be a coward. The heroine came to the events saying that she was grateful for the invitation and was very glad to meet the mayors. Ellet replied that she did not expect to see Judith here because partners were not allowed at this banquet, and then, in response, thanked Lady Pilgrim for her visit.